I'm Erin Robinson. I'm the Executive Director of ESIP, the Earth Science Information Partners. And this year we're focusing on data in action, and it's part of our strategic plan. And the goal that it covers is increasing the use and value of Earth Science data and information. So normally we have our sponsors talk at the State of the Federation that happens in January, and this year we didn't have our sponsor presentations then, and so we're using this time now to kick off this webinar series and also to have a sponsor update from ESIP sponsors, which are NASA, NOAA, and USGS. So since this is the first of this series of, in this webinar series, I wanted to make sure to introduce ESIP and really the value of ESIP. So ESIP helps members of the Earth Science data community find each other across organizations by fostering rich collaborative experiences. So most of you are probably most common with ESIP meetings. We have them twice a year, once in January and once in July. The July meeting normally moves around the country. But the other things that we do in between are fostering collaboration through virtual collaboration of clusters, and all of that is really to connect members across the data lifecycle, from operational data facilities at each of the agencies, innovative research that's going on, often in academic settings, and then more applied work reaching end users. And ESIP is not new. ESIP has been around for 20 years. It started in 1998. And this past year, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary. And I think it was really a nice kind of look back and look forward for all that's been accomplished in the Earth Science data community. And then really, I think the exciting frontiers that we're heading toward. And that's one of the things that I think each of our sponsors will talk to today. So as I mentioned, this webinar is part of our year-long look at increasing the use and value of Earth Science data and information. And when we started this conversation in January at the winter meeting, what we really found was that increasing the use and value of Earth Science data is really making data actionable. And that has, I thought it would be more about Earth Science data out in the world in state and local policy making and those kind of conversations. But what I found earlier this week was really with the Earth Science Data System Working Group at NASA, that there's also a really interesting technical conversation to have. And I'm gonna, I think, invite everybody to mute if you are not already muted as you're joining. And the other thing that ties ESIP together are the values of the community. So ESIP is a really agile, collaborative community. It's innovative and I think completely community and volunteer driven. So these goals came from the community. And I think they provide this broad umbrella for all of us to connect the things that we do. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our sponsors. The order is going to be Skye Bristol from USGS, and then we're going to switch Kevin Murphy and Ed Kearns. So we'll hear from NASA second and then NOAA third. So with that, I will turn it over to Skye to take it away, and I'll pass the screen to you, Skye. Maybe. Perfect. Thank you, Megan.
Great, thank you. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about what's going on in USGS, and I really missed our opportunity from USGS to participate in the winter meeting this year due to the lapse in appropriations and different things that we had to deal with that along the way, but we are back into the swing of things and moving a lot of interesting work along across USGS. So a little bit about our sponsorship of ESIP and involvement in ESIP. We really continue to see our investment in this community really both through our people and a little bit of funding that we're able to provide as a great benefit and a key enabler of the USGS mission. We continue to see the opportunities evolve as we get out and connect with the community that ESIP helps to bring together through the values and activities that that Erin mentioned come right back to return on investment within our organization and our ability to move innovative technical solutions together forward, and that really help to achieve what USGS is trying to do. We operate a cooperative agreement with ESIP under a special Department of Interior legal authority. It's funded through my particular branch, the Biogeographic Characterization branch, which is part of Science, Analytics, and Synthesis, core science systems within the USGS. And we have been able to successfully begin attracting some additional funding contributions from other groups in the USGS by piloting this effort through BCB in my particular area. Right now, we're in the third funding year of a 3-year agreement that we have with fiscal 2019 funding that we'll be putting in this year, covering work that will carry on into 2020. And we've begun working toward a new, more 5-year time range cooperative agreement that'll take us from 2020 to 2025 in terms of where that's projecting out. Our previous agreement was funded at $500,000 over those 3 years, and we'll be looking toward some future funding level that we'll be able to support and keep moving along with our agreement. We've seen a lot come about through that agreement, and I'll mention a couple of other specifics here in just a minute, that specific activities that we've had going on. One of the key things that you all should be aware of, and I think most folks know quite a bit about, just through the continued cross-pollination that we've seen between ESIP and the USGS community for data integration. Thanks a lot to the dedicated coordination efforts that Leslie Skye, who heads up the CDI effort in USGS, working with ESIP organization folks. So we continue to see a lot of kind of cross-membership activities between our different groups, sharing in monthly teleconferences and workshop activities between USGS and the broader community that we have there. The CDI in USGS, one of our major activities there is to fund through seed funding these key innovative development efforts that we put out through a competitive proposal process every year to move ahead with data integration and synthesis activities and emerging technologies. And I encourage you to check out the latest funded projects this year that I think really align with this idea of data to action, and align very much with the theme of this year's CDI workshop. The 2019 workshop will be held June 4th to 7th in Boulder, and the theme there is big data to smart data. So very much in line with the idea of leveraging these data systems that we have to really support decision analysis and decision support. And there's a raft of funded projects this year that you'll see that are really leading in that direction in terms of taking innovative ideas that have already gotten to a certain point of maturity and figuring out how to work those through an engineering cycle to turn them into real on-the-ground capabilities for decision makers that we support, particularly through Department of Interior bureaus, Department of Ag organizations, and other governmental organizations that are out there. Uh-oh. Somehow sorry about that. I seem to have hit a button wrong somewhere. In terms of USGS, kind of broader USGS goings on, a couple of things that I'll mention. So we continue to play the major role that we have as an unbiased science organization in helping to protect and enhance ultimately the prosperity and well-being of the whole planet in various ways. We continue to provide critical services in both chronic hazards and acute hazards in terms of monitoring, response, predictive capabilities that we're providing across a number of different fronts. We've made some major advances this last year that some of you may have been involved in or aware of in terms of early detection, rapid response, and invasive species, wildlife disease, and a number of other bio-related emerging hazards that we deal with. And we continue to make some major advances in our ability to provide energy and mineral assessments, and increasingly an integrated assessment approach that brings really a whole view of all that's going on within a given area as we go in to conduct those kinds of assessments. So some major efforts there that are continuing to support advances in national prosperity and national security, both internal to the nation, and as we conduct that work throughout the world, we're contributing to those efforts. We do have upcoming fairly soon some things that have been in the works for quite some time. You'll start seeing some things in the news publicly before too long, and a little bit of it has already been announced widely as the current administration works to kind of take a longer view toward the future of where the Department of Interior in particular is going. We'll see some program restructuring within the USGS, some ways that our different programs are coming together toward that overall vision, and some fairly major happenings that are starting to take shape, including moving many of our headquarters functions and headquarters staff farther out to the west here. So those kinds of things are continuing to play out, but you'll see some more things on that from the USGS in the not too distant future. So just a couple of closing things that are a little bit closer to home to my particular work and this whole area, some projects that I'm particularly excited about and involved in. I've had an opportunity over the last couple of months myself to take a little bit of a mini sabbatical, a detail opportunity working with our geosciences again to redesign the National Digital Catalog of physical collections across the USGS, state geological surveys, and other organizations. So I put a whole new architecture in place, and we'll be rolling that out in the coming months as we get those pieces refined. So that's been a fun project to advance some new cloud-based serverless technologies that I've been excited to learn about. We have released and continue to work on our USGS National Biogeographic Map as a framework for decision analysis. We'll be talking about some of the concepts there around discrete scientific software analysis packages as part of the CDI workshop that I mentioned that we're pretty excited about in terms of where that's heading. We've made some major advances over the last year or two in terms of marine biological observation data, another area that I'm quite involved in. I'm particularly excited about a growing partnership that we have between NOAA, IUS, the BICO-DEMO group, various USGS and partnerships that we're developing to have a more robust U.S. presence in terms of the marine biological data that we're able to assemble, integrate, synthesize, and push out onto the Ocean Biogeographic Information System, GBIF, and these other networks. We've been able to bring about some robust online APIs in those international systems that are really helping to drive some cool analytical capability that we're very excited about. And on the policy front, we're really seeing things come together around the essential ocean variables for biodiversity developed through a concept of a global ocean observing system related closely to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the upcoming UN Decade of the Ocean that we're quite involved in helping to guide and influence in terms of where that goes and what its support will be for increasing scientific activity that's going to help support that. I'm also kind of on a little bit more technical front. I'm really excited about a partnership that we continue to have with the deep dive folks at University of Wisconsin-Madison towards systematic monitoring of really what you can consider as the scientific literature stream and knowledge assembly methods across that. Some of our latest work, also funded through a CDI project, is doing some pre-indexing work on that entire GeoDeep Dive library of millions of publications to the integrated taxonomic information system set of species information that will allow us to rapidly understand where there's new literature popping up related to the species of interest that we have, either from a listing standpoint or other types of management concerns. So we're really excited about beginning to put that sort of thing into production over the coming months. And I'm also interested in a project that really got sparked very much by activities at the summer meeting last year in terms of indigenous knowledge systems and indigenous data sovereignty, and some work that I'll be doing over the next number of months that's developing this vision for how we express the ecological and conservation values of tribal lands and indigenous knowledge and management policies within the broader network of protected areas data that my group is concerned with in particular. So a number of really cool projects, great connections that we have through the ESIP community to help move these things along, and very excited to see where the data to action theme goes over the next number of months.
Great, thanks, Skye. We have one thing I didn't mention is that I think it's the first time that I've had all three of our sponsors on a single call at one time. And so they all have different schedules. So I want to take a few minutes if anybody has specific questions for Skye before we move on to Kevin. Because Skye, I think you have to drop off shortly.
Yep, thank you.
Yep. So are there specific questions for Skye? One I had, Skye, was just when the UN Decade of the Ocean, when does that officially start?
Let's see, I think we're actually kicking off. I've got a whole raft of schedule activities on that. I'm trying to look at 2021 to 2030 officially. So I can't remember what month in 2021 that's kicking off. It seems to be there's like a March timeline for that, but that's the official decade.
Cool. And I know that we have Leslie Shee on the call. So Leslie, is there anything else you'd like to add on CDI?
I just want to thank Skye for bringing up our group and our workshop coming up. We're always looking for more ways to get connections with the ESIP collaboration areas. So don't be surprised if I reach out to any of the collaboration area leads to see if there's some exciting things we can do together in the future. Thanks, Erin.
Perfect. Great. Well, thanks so much. If people think of other questions, you can put them in the chat box. We can get them to Skye after the fact. And I think with that, we will move on to our next speaker, which is Kevin Murphy. And Kevin is the program executive for the Earth Science Data Systems at NASA. And Kevin, he will make you the presenter.
All right, just give me a second here. Let's see.
Yep.
You guys see my screen? The right?
See your screen. Yep. And if you put your slides into presentation mode, I think we'll see that too. Awesome. Yep. Great. Take it away.
The right one. Okay. Move some of these things out of the way. I got a bunch of panels on here. Okay, so thank you for having me today. You know, we've been working with ESUP for, I guess, ever, and we really appreciate, from the NASA perspective, everything ESA has been able to contribute to their science division here at NASA since its inception, and we look forward to continuing those activities for quite a while in the future. Thank you, Erin, for setting this up and also helping us with our Earth Science Data System Working Group meeting in Annapolis, Maryland this week. Hope you got home safe. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is not anything specifically data systems, but much more related to the status of the Earth Science Division and some of the upcoming plans and missions that we have. Let's see. There we go. So first thing that people usually ask us about is do we have enough money to do what we want to be able to do and what we were asked to do? And resoundingly, the answer to that question, at least for this fiscal year, is yes. We have a number of capabilities that are and instruments that are capable that are in development and operations. We'll continue the program of record that we've been executing for about the last decade, and we'll include the Discover, Epic, NISTAR, PACE, Clario, Pathfinder, and OCO3 activities. OCO3 is supposed to launch at the end of April of this year. We have funding to support our designated observable studies and activities related to those studies. We have initiated an EVC1 or Earth Venture Continuity 1 solicitation, and we are planning for a number of incubation activities related to the last decadal survey. Additionally, we support ongoing operations and the evolutions of the data systems, especially to deal with these high rate data missions that we have over the next 4 to 5 years. We often show this chart, and this chart basically demonstrates the things that are in blue are things that are in extended operations. Things that are green are in primary operations, and those are missions that we're currently collecting information from and distributing it to the public. The ones in orange are the ones that are being implemented. Basically, we're bending metal and putting things together to launch those on the timelines estimates that you see in the brackets. And in the yellow, we have missions that are pre-formulation. You'll notice here as well on the left-hand side that we have a number of instruments on our partnership with the ISS, and we've launched many of those pretty recently, actually, and they continue to be an incredibly valuable set of data, an incredibly valuable partnership with ISS. We've been supporting a number of CubeSat activities, which aren't necessarily related to long-term continuous measurements of the globe, but certainly demonstrate some incredible technologies that we can use to potentially operationalize in the future. We work a lot with the European Union on the Copernicus program, so we mirror a number of their products, work with CEOS to share our information across those different space agencies and have a strong relationship with NOAA, especially with regard to production of JPSS 1 and 2 data products. So recently, back in September, we launched ISAT-2, and we anticipate public availability of the data from that mission in the June timeframe. There are some incredible capabilities based on early science validation activities that are going on. We can see things like bathymetry, which we didn't expect. We can of course measure ice balance with it. But I think when these data sets become publicly available, there will be an incredible number of uses for them. JEDI was also launched recently, and that should be going through, actually it just finished its operational readiness review. So it's probably as of around about half an hour ago, it's now an operational instrument in terms of kind of the NASA KDP cycle. And we have a lot of big plans for that, and the early returns from that mission as well are just astoundingly positive. Finally, for this year, we have a planned launch of OCO3, which continues the OCO2 measurements, but on the station. And we're really looking forward to that and the increased sampling frequency that we get with it. Now moving on to this slide, which is our Earth Venture slide. We've been running this program since around 2008, 2009. And as you see, we've selected a number of things and launched them as well. We've really moved from a posture of launching an instrument every couple of years to launching a couple of instruments every year, which is difficult because we have a lot of extra work to do, but it's also really pushing the boundary of what types of information we can do and how nimble and capable our scientists are. Right now on the street, I believe we have EVI-5, which is probably under review, EVC-1, which came out and is going to look at radiation budget measurements, and then we'll have an EVI or EVM, which is an Earth Venture instrument, and EVMs are basically nuts to bolts. The PI builds the instrument, launches the instrument, runs the investigation a little later this year. So we have a robust program of these capabilities, along with the larger missions that we have, such as SWAT, NISAR, Sentinel-6, A and B. We also are kind of expanding our usage of private data from small satellite constellations. We started this process about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. It's really an activity that we think can potentially augment many of the observational capabilities that we have and make products from these smaller constellations available to our research community. We're currently in a situation where we're evaluating data from 3 separate companies, Planet Labs, Digital Globe, and Spire, to augment our existing capabilities in those areas. We anticipate that process being complete in the next 6 to 9 months, at which time data from those companies, if they pass the evaluation, will be made available to our research community. This is an experiment. We're learning a lot of things as we go through this, including what types of licenses are necessary for the use of these products. We, at NASA, have had an open data policy for about 25 years, and we now have to work with these commercial entities and maintain, their ability to be commercial entities. So we'll be working with them to understand the capabilities of their instruments and what types of license agreements we can have with them. We see this marketplace as being incredibly dynamic, and since we selected these 3 companies that met the criteria for our previous request for information, there have been a number of companies that now meet those criteria, and we will provide on-ramps for them starting in the late fall timeframe through public comment periods. But what we've seen so far is a really dynamic marketplace, and one which can certainly add some capabilities to our global measurements. Probably the biggest thing that's going on these days in terms of understanding how we are going to be working in the future was the most recent decadal survey. And this really kind of endorsed the program of record that we are currently under, but is also designating some new measurements and a couple of new programs to support improved and increased scientific capabilities over the next decade. This is a lot of a chart to bring in at once, and my next chart is a little bit more of a simplification of that. But basically here, there are some designated observables, what you see in that kind of light green area, and the medium green area are some things that we call our explorer types of missions, which are not things that we are likely to be able to fully implement in a robust way, but we probably should be able to implement in the next decade or so. And then we have some incubation capabilities, which are technology activities related to improving the measurements after this decadal survey period. And some of the measurements kind of go between 2 of the categories or so. In terms of the designated observables themselves, we aren't asking for specific mission architectures or specific instrument capabilities to achieve these measurements at this point, but we are looking at mission architectures that could help support them, including non-traditional, at least in terms of like one mission supporting all of the specific observable requirements. So, you could think of different mission architectures, including commercial or multiple satellite activities related to any one of these, or also kind of our traditional ones. So these are the things that we're really working on over the next 10 years, and we hope to get a couple of them put together and available before the next decadal survey. Within the data system component, we continue to work on improving the efficiency of the operations and the ability to evolve the data systems while maintaining free and open access and government stewardship of the data that we have. We are really preparing for some high-rate data missions, including the NASA ISRO synthetic aperture radar mission, which will produce on the order of 25 petabytes of data per year, and the soil, surface, water, and ocean topology mission, in collaboration with CNES, which will produce about 15 petabytes of data per year. And we're going to put that in the Earth Data Cloud, which will run on commercial cloud environments for public access and government stewardship. So we're doing this all with open source software, using transparent and extendable capabilities, not only for the processing systems, but also for many of the algorithms, which aren't protected. Finally, we started a thing called the Interagency Implementation and Advanced Concept Team at Marshall Space Flight Center. And they're really trying to help build and work with agencies to better use the products NASA already has, and prioritize support for products that they may find useful in the future. We're trying to do a better job at managing the airborne data that we have, and we're doing some pretty significantly interesting rapid prototyping, especially within the artificial intelligence and machine learning worlds. We have a couple of programs that kind of people within the ESUP community have traditionally applied to. I think Mike Little's AIST program is probably already on the street, and if it might even be closed at this point. But access will be open again this fall, and we're really trying to work on people that propose to the access program to allow them to integrate their capabilities directly into our core systems over time. We have a citizen science for Earth Science program, where six of the proposals were selected for implementation. That was last year, and they're doing really well. We'll have another solicitation for this in about a year from now. Other than that, I don't have anything. If you have some questions, please let me know.
Thanks, Kevin. I think one of the things to note with Kevin's talk is the work that they've done with their open source policies, and I think it's been really interesting to watch this particular agency migrate to the cloud as well. And I'll also note that you mentioned Planet, and that was one of the things that came up in ESDSWG about the work with those private data providers. And Planet will be at ESIP this summer, giving a plenary talk as part of the ESIP lab plenary. So we're looking forward to, I think, figuring out how federal and private data work together. Are there other questions for Kevin?
Erin, there's a general question in the chat box, maybe not necessarily specifically for Kevin.
Yeah, but I think, Kevin, so the question is, what specific groups at NASA should get together for further discussion of ESIP-related topics? And there was also a quick question if you could show the citizen science slide again. So, you know, I think Earth Science Data System Working Groups is definitely one of those groups, and it seems to me that there's probably some connection to the impact work that you mentioned. Are there other places where?
So those would be two of the biggest ones. You might also consider, you know, working with some of the disasters clusters and those folks.
Yep.
The Applied Science program, and you know, in terms of Earth Science, those are probably the biggest groups. So Earth Science, ESDSWG, Applied Science, and Impact.
Yep. And I saw Nancy Serby on the phone. Nancy, I don't know if you have anything else to add on the applied science capacity building side of things, if there's a place where ESIP might connect there. No audio. Any other questions for Kevin? Great. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for this overview of what's going on within your program, and we'll look forward to connecting with a lot of your groups at the summer meeting and in between.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. So now our last presenter is Ed Kearns, and Ed has just turned on his video, which is so wonderful, Ed.
Sure.
And
But I don't have slides.
nope, that's totally fine. No slides needed. Perfect. So just have a placeholder slide in your video. And so Ed is the Chief Data Officer at NOAA, and he's taken over the Big Data Partnership, or I guess has always managed the Big Data Partnership, but that's one of the things that I think the ESUP community knows about NOAA's work and Ed. So Ed, I'll let you take it away.
All right, thanks. And yeah, so this will, what I will talk about maybe a little different than what Kevin and Skye talked about, maybe a little bit more policy oriented, less specific in some of the projects. But you know, what I'm working on are a lot of general overarching activities across the NOAA line offices, like Weather Service and Fisheries and those that you're all familiar with, NOS and others. There's a lot going on in NOAA, and I'm not going to try to represent everything that's going on with NOAA with data, of course, but to try to give you all a sense of what some of the major initiatives are that are spanning the organization. Many of you, of course, knew GIF-DLB for a long time, you know, working on an NCAR, and a lot of the responsibilities for the relationship with ESIP now is coming to my office, and that seems like a very subtle difference, but inside the organization, yeah, my purview in the office is trying to help everybody across the organization achieve their data goals and data services, and so it's an exciting job. It's new for NOAA. It's been around in existence for about 2 years, and you know, before I had this job, I was part of NOAA with NESDIS with the archive, and that's how I know many of you, you know, in the past, and have interacted with you at ESIP in the past through those mechanisms. So, looking forward to continue to you know, enjoy this relationship. Where we're going right now, so there's a lot of big pushes. One is centered around data strategy, and there's two aspects of that. One is the federal data strategy that many of you have heard about. So both myself and Kim Valentine from NOAA are involved on that team of about 40 or so people that are working across agencies to come up with the federal data strategy. So NOAA's given up some of our time to the White House to continue to work that. So that's exciting work. It's you know, continuing on, there'll be another chance to comment publicly for everybody that's interested in these kinds of data policy and data practices, probably at the end of April. So, you know, keep watching data.strategy.gov or strategy.data.gov for the latest on that. NOAA is also following the lead and creating our own data strategy. Of course, we have a lot of good policies and practices that have been developed over the last couple of decades along with this community. And what we're trying to do is codify those practices so that we continue to make good progress, and we can you know, make progress more rapidly in those areas where we need the most amount of work. Along with that, hand in hand, we're also working on a cloud strategy. So, you know, as we're adopting the new cloud technologies to do our business, there's also opportunities related to compute and data and search and discovery and other things that we know that we can take advantage of. And if we do this migration, you know, deliberately and strategically, that we're hoping that we can realize some real improvements in our data architecture and data systems that everybody can benefit from. And so we're continuing to work on that as well. The big data project that I've been working for a couple of years, that many of you are familiar with, you've heard about it before. This is a partnership with private industry that's focused on the value of data. So these are ways of getting our open data from NOAA out to the public, to the science community, to industry, through our partners' cloud platforms. And our partners are AWS, Microsoft, IBM, Google, and the Open Commons Consortium. And this has been going on now for almost 4 years. We were before 4 years next month. It's supposed to be a 3-year project. We extended it last year to be a 4-year project. And this is also an experiment to see if this can work. What we've learned over the last 4 years is, yes, this can work. And what we are working on right now is a transition of that experimental big data project into a operational big data project. So can we sustain that partnership with industry to keep making our open data available in this fundamentally different way? And we've seen a lot of momentum gained over the last year. We've got over 70 different NOAA data sets now are available through these partners platforms. We've seen orders of magnitude, improvements in the number of users of some of these data sets that we're putting out there for consumption. Some, like the National Water Model, this is the first time when some of those data sets, in particular the 23-year retrospective run of that product, have been made available on a wide basis. A lot of exciting developments there. GO16 and GO17 data continue to be very popular moving through this platform. So many people want that data, and it's hard to distribute to them given our limited bandwidth on the NOAA side. So this is a way that there's a lot of new companies that have been created over the last 3 years that we've heard from that say that they wouldn't be in existence if they didn't have this easy access to federal data, to free federal data on these platforms, that they can quickly get new information services up and running and get them to market quickly. So some great stories out of this, great successes out of the experimental phase. And like I said, we want to keep that going. Some other things that we've had a hand in this is some new services such as Google Dataset Search. I know many of you on this call are aware of it or actually help participate in that and help get the schema.org tags created and socialized and implemented at different places. Google is showing what can happen when you double down on that and actually have a search and discovery service based upon that. So it's still in beta at Google, but it's showing us all what might be possible by leveraging those existing search capabilities, the knowledge graphs that they have behind those capabilities, and how we can leverage it for earth science gain. So, some really cool stuff. Other interesting stuff going on across NOAA that's kind of new and exciting and has big implications for data architecture would be things like over in National Marine Fisheries, we have something called, we call it environmental DNA or eDNA. This is a practice of sampling seawater in an area and then examining what are the constituents of the DNA in that seawater in order to figure out which species are living in that seawater. This is a fundamentally different way of doing fisheries assessments. Has big computational impacts on our systems, and of course, being able to share that data afterwards, not just for fisheries use, but other people who also want to use that information, whether it's for pharmaceutical use or whatever it might be. We want to make sure that open data are available to others, and it presents quite a challenge to us to be able to get those things out there. Like a lot of agencies, we're coming in terms with the artificial intelligence challenge in front of us, and the White House has put out a recent executive order on artificial intelligence, trying to get agencies ready to use these things. Of course, AI, machine learning, these are tools that earth sciences have had in their toolbox for a long time. But what's changing, of course, is the way that these tools can be employed and the scale at which they can be employed. And this is what's really exciting, because we can do science a lot faster. We can actually get through petabytes upon petabytes of data in ways that we couldn't before. And we have a couple pilot studies going on with machine learning and AI right now, particularly with Google, looking at identification of whale songs from the large acoustic archives that we have, as well as doing speciation and counting fish that are rolling across decks of fishing boats, right? So instead of having an observer on board, you have a video camera instead. But if you want to count how many fish are being collected and being caught, this is another way you can do it, of course, too. So there's, some of these neat pilot projects going on. overall, of course, if you can imagine us trying to implement the ability of any of the 6,000 or so NOAA scientists that we have on staff to enable them to use these same kind of AI tools in the cloud, it's going to have big implications on our data architecture and how we migrate from our federal servers into a cloud-based environment. And so we're trying to do this very deliberately and strategically so that we do enable these kinds of capabilities at scale across the organization, across fisheries and National Ocean Service, National Weather Service, and NESDIS, and OMAO. And we try to reach every part of NOAA so we all have the same capabilities for doing our business and doing our science. You've also, many of you have heard about some of the legislation that's been passed in the last couple months. The Weather Act reauthorization bill is something that generated a lot of excitement. The original Weather Act a year or two ago was exciting. The reauthorization of that, which was, I think that was maybe December. That was also had additional instructions for NOAA to move out on certain things, including some improvements on numerical weather prediction in the cloud, and of course the data backplane that's going to support that. That's exciting work to have to take on. The Geospatial Data Act passed in October of last calendar year, and that was tucked away in the FAA reauthorization bill. But that has big implications for the FGDC and how that's being implemented. And NOAA, of course, has a big role in that, along with USGS and Department of Interior and others. And then the most recent bill that's passed is the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act, which is a very innocuous name, but the second title on that is the Government Open Data Act that's been bouncing around Congress for a couple of years. So that did pass. It was signed into law in mid-January by the president. And so now we are working to see how this is going to be implemented. And that we're going to start running fast on that in July of this year. And so if you're familiar with that bill, there's a lot of provisions in there to say how we're supposed to be handling our data and sharing our data. The open data community of which this group is a part is, I think we'll be very happy with the provisions in that law because it is following a lot of the best practices that were developed by this community for over the last 10 or 20 years. One of the nice things about it is actually saying that we the government, shall publish our data, our open data, with an open data license, not just in public domain anymore. I know many of you have a lot of interest in that topic. They still haven't said which licenses yet, so we'll continue to work on this active area of discovery. But the intent is excellent, and it's going to simplify a lot of the data exchange on the international stage that we sometimes run into challenges now when we put things out in public domain, and that has a certain meaning in the U.S. It doesn't necessarily have the same meaning in international law. So we're cleaning some of that stuff up. Another one of the provisions in the Evidence Act is requiring that federal agencies have chief data officers to worry about these things and be responsible for life cycle data value and responsibilities. And so that's, I think, an important step forward in helping everybody be able to use federal data. And very excited. I mean, it's going to be a 5 or 10 year journey for implementation of this government-wide. I'm sure it's not something that's easy to do for a lot of agencies. I'm very blessed that NOAA is way ahead on this and a lot of agencies because we've been living this for a number of years, and so we'll be able to make some rapid progress on a lot of this. So those are some of the challenges, and it spans from the technical to the policy. And I know ESIP represents that entire community, that entire continuum too. So we're going to be very busy and really look forward to working with ESIP on these issues going forward. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks so much, Ed. That was a great overview of where things are. So we will. Are there any questions for Ed? And And I might go back to that more general question again about specific groups at NOAA that should further discuss ESIP related topics. I know that the Environmental Data Management Committee and the workshop that we put together is one place, but are there other places, particularly since we're now broader than NESDIS, that we should be looking at?
I think the numerical weather prediction folks, and this includes climate prediction. There's a couple of different foci of that activity, but Princeton University, GFDL, the Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Lab that NOAA has there is one of them.
Yep.
And Oak Ridge, Tennessee is another. So there are a few groups around Fairmont, West Virginia, and then out west, of course, around in Boulder. A lot of interesting data work is going to go on there to support the advances in numerical weather prediction. That group typically hasn't been well represented at EDMC, at the NOAA EDMC in the past, just for whatever historical reasons. But they're kind of a niche market in some ways. But as we, like a lot of other niche markets in NOAA and in our science community, as we come together under common cloud resources in particular that now are available to all in common data architectures, I think a lot of the silo walls should come down. And being able to reach out to some of these groups and to work more collaboratively. ESIP has been just a fantastic model for how to work collaboratively across silos for many years now. But as we know in ESIP, not every niche is represented within ESIP. It's pretty inclusive, but we haven't reached all the tiny corners of specialization in earth science and earth science data just yet. But we're getting there. That work, and then also a lot of the DNA genetics work.
Yep.
That work is expanding so quickly. I think at Ocean Sciences, the USGS Sciences last year, listening to some of these, some of the interesting work going on, just envelope calculations. When I realized our NOAA fisheries of DNA groups, and groups will have more satellite science in 3 to 5 years. And that was a revelation. How many sequencers are running out there for so many different purposes. We're collecting data at an enormous rate right now, and there's a lot of challenges related to the use of that data, the sharing of that data, utilization on a broader scale. And quite frankly, our fisheries services haven't dealt with that challenge so quickly before. It's a hard one. They don't necessarily have the resources, I think, allocated yet to do some of that stuff yet. So having some advice from the ESIP community, I think would be incredibly valuable to them. Helping to engage with them is something is part of my job, is helping them build bridges between groups like ESIP and those our organization that could use the expertise and advice.
Cool. Those are two great, I think, places to think about engaging. Any other, so you do have one other comment, Ed, I wonder if there's any citizen science data management work that's been going on within NOAA. Kevin mentioned it for NASA, and there's a comment that EPA is also developing some citizen science data management strategy.
Yeah, so there's a number of citizen science work going on in many different aspects, everything from the cooperative observer program that Weather Service has been running for many years to some analytical work like for the hurricanes. I know there's a group that's been classifying hurricanes for a number of years too. And then within the big data project, working with those giant, platform providers, there's been a number of interesting activities that have started there. So I think we don't have necessarily a data management strategy when it comes to those groups, as opposed to trying to encourage those groups to grow. When those data come inside the federal boundary, we have then we apply our federal data management strategies to them. But once they're outside our federal boundaries, we tend to like to facilitate that work, but not dictate it. And one of the things that probably one of the things that's most exciting to me related to the big data project, which again is outside of the federal control. Again, it's something that we're publishing our data into. We don't own it. It's owned by the community. It's owned by these industrial partners, but we're trying to help it grow. One of the great things that we've learned over the last 4 years is that, hey, just parking our federal data outside on some kind of computing platform, goes a long way. But you can get a lot better impact when you work with the community to do two things. One is to load the data into tools that will break the data down past the scientific formats we tend to deliver them in and start to interpret them into some other kind of analytical framework. So examples are Amazon's Athena or Google's BigQuery, for example. The data usage goes through the roof, hundreds or 1,000 times more usage once we start to take that approach. And the other aspect, I think, is right up ESIP Valley here, and that is to actually have conversations about the meaning of the data, the formats of the data, how to translate the data into the most modern consumable forms that that industry needs today, that science needs today. As the federal government, of course, we tend to be a little bit slow in plotting, or we like to say deliberate about how we're going, right? We tend to like to be on the trailing edge of technology because that's how appropriations and stuff tend to go. The real data innovation that ESIP has excelled at, we have found when that exists side by side with the provision of NOAA's data out on these industrial platforms, that the usage by industry really takes off, because there's a venue for having those kinds of discussions. Amazon Web Services has tried to keep a group going. Some of you are members of this, called Earth on AWS. They have promoted the use of NOAA and USGS and NASA data on their platform by providing researchers with credits to compute and do other things on their platform. And it's been successful so far. ESIP, I think, represents the opportunity to do that on an even grander scale, across platforms and across communities. But without that very knowledgeable body of experts that can have the discussion with people that are interested from industry, or interested from the general public, or from other research communities outside of earth science, to be able to explain our data to others is incredibly valuable. And without that, it's harder for the data to be used by a wider audience. And so I'm very interested in any kind of ideas that we may be able to cook up this year to see how we can leverage the ESIP expertise to enable the wider use of the federal data.
I think that's a perfect sort of place to end on, maybe. And I'd note that AWS has been working with ESIP just on that last point, and we're planning a data optimization for the cloud workshop, and hoping to showcase some of those examples, Ed, that you just mentioned, and then hopefully a few from NASA and USGS as well. But I think to continue that technical conversation on emerging best practices. But that's really super. So thanks so much, Ed, and also Kevin and Skye, for presenting on the work that our sponsors are working on, and how we meaningfully connect to ESIP. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Megan Carter, ESIP's Community Director, to wrap up this webinar and tell you about a few more ways that you can engage with ESIP in the next few months.
Thank you, Erin. That was great. I'd like to just focus your attention for 2 more minutes and 3 slides to tell you how to stay up to date on the webinar series in ESIP in general. First, the Data in Action webinar series will continue throughout the year. The next installment will be April 19th, as you see on the screen, at 1 p.m. Eastern, and it will feature lightning presentations from ESIP's vibrant and diverse community-driven collaboration areas that increase the use and value of earth science data by tackling common data challenges and opportunities. So this webinar aims to broaden awareness of what the collaboration areas are doing, and also increase communication and collaboration between the existing collaboration areas, as well as to invite new participants. So hopefully some of you all will join in. This promises to be an enlightening and exhilarating webinar, so please join if you can. You can also find more information about upcoming webinars on our website. So there's a link here at esipfed.org/webinars. You'll also be able to access webinar recordings after the fact on the ESIP YouTube channel. So if we can go to the next slide. Another way to engage with ESIP is by attending the 2019 ESIP Summer Meeting, which will take place in Tacoma, Washington, July 16th through the 19th. For 20 years, ESIP meetings have brought together the most innovative thinkers and leaders around Earth observation data, and this meeting will be no exception. We're currently accepting ideas for workshops, breakout sessions, posters, and more. You can learn more, submit a session, and register at the link you see on the screen, esipfed.org/summer meeting. And now moving to the next slide. Finally, you do not have to wait until the summer meeting to get involved or stay involved in ESIP. You're welcome to engage in one of the collaboration areas that I mentioned. You're welcome to encourage your organization to partner with ESIP if they're not already a partner. You can do something as simple as spreading the word about ESIP, and this link on the bottom right-hand corner, the ESIP one-pager, is a great way to share what ESIP is all about. To receive a once-weekly update on all things ESIP and ESIP adjacent, please join our Monday update mailing list using the ePearl link on the screen. So finally, that's it. We want to thank all of our speakers, and we want to thank all of you for attending the first webinar in our Data in Action webinar series. We hope to see you on the next webinar on April 19th and also at the ESIP Summer Meeting.
Great. Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks.